Hello friend, thanks for joining me for another book chat. Today let's spend some time with Cuckoo Land by Anthony Doerr. This book was originally published back in 2021, and I decided to read this. You know, I've had another book, an earlier book by Anthony Doerr on my want to read list for quite some time, All the Light We Cannot See, that I have yet to get to. But this one really struck my interest mainly because of the subject matter. This is a book about a lost book, and we're going to talk more about that here in a bit. But I decided to go ahead and give this one a read. So Cuckoo Land by Anthony Doerr. So spoiler alert here, I am not going to give away anything that I would think would detract from a first-time reader's experience with this book, so I'm going to be careful about that. But this book basically, it weaves a story centered around 5 main characters, but there's this common thread that really binds all the characters together, and that is a book called Cuckoo Land. Not this Cuckoo Land, but another one that we're going to talk about more here in a bit. But first, let's meet our 5 main characters in this book. So first we have Anna. She's 13 years old. The year's around 1452 in Constantinople. Young Anna works in an embroidery shop and lives there with her sister in Constantinople. She's not very good at embroidery. She's a very curious young girl. Her sister, however, is really good with embroidery, and so they make a meager living there. But eventually Anna comes across this man who knows how to read, and she brings him little bits of bread and things like that she can manage to scrap together. She takes to him in order to get him to teach her to read. So that sets our stage for Anna. Then we have Omir, who is around her same age, maybe slightly older, but he is from a small village, or outside of a small village, also around Constantinople. He was born with a cleft lip, which during the superstition of this time caused his family to be driven from the village, so they sort of live in isolation. And he's sort of a lonely boy because he has to, or he avoids other people, or rather other people avoid him because of this cleft lip. And so his main relationships are with animals, specifically 2 particular oxen. But as fate would happen, the Sultan is passing through his area and sort of conscripts him into service, forced service with him and his oxen, because the Sultan is on his way to Constantinople to lay siege to it. Then we have Zeno. We need to fast forward about 500 years into the future, into around the 1940s, where we pick up with the character Zeno as a young man in a small town who's growing up with a single father. He's also a lonely child for different reasons, and his closest friend really then is his dog. We follow Zeno through the course of his really childhood, and then he eventually, once he becomes 17, he joins the army and goes off to the Korean War, which ultimately he is a prisoner of war there. So we get that experience with him, and then a little bit later on too, which I'll mention here in a bit, with our next character, Seymour. So then in the 21st century, young Seymour is also in this same small town in Idaho where Zeno lives. At this point, Zeno is a really old man. Seymour's growing up with a single mother who's really struggling to keep their life together monetarily, just keep a roof over their head and food on their table. Very challenging for this young single mother. Seymour is also neurologically not typical, and so he has difficulty in social situations and with any kind of external stimuli. And he's most at peace when he's out in the wooded area that's near the trailer where he and his mom live, among the trees there and the animals there, particularly this great owl that he kind of befriends, that he calls trusty friend. Finally, the 5th main character is named Constance. This is in the future, some distance in the future. Young Constance is a young woman. She is on board an intergenerational starship, which has left Earth due to the environmental damage due to climate change and whatnot. It's on its way to a distant planet. Constance is on this intergenerational ship where she will never reach the destination, right? It's going to take centuries, several centuries to get to their destination. But she's an intellectually curious young woman as well. She has access to the ship's library. It's a virtual library that contains all the books basically of Earth, including her favorite, which is this atlas, which she can kind of go anywhere in the world virtually. At least she can go anywhere in the world that as it existed when the ship left Earth. So that is all of our main 5 characters. Now, it doesn't seem like, since we're talking about different times and these really different characters, that they are intertwined, but they are, and it's all really around this book called Cloud Cuckoo Land. So not this Cloud Cuckoo Land, as I mentioned, but an ancient one. The Cloud Cuckoo Land that connects them is by Antonius Diogenes. And I think this was one of the coolest things about this book, actually. The Cloud Cuckoo Land is a fictional book. This Antonius Diogenes, is a fictional take on a real book of Antonius Diogenes that really existed but has since been lost to history. And there, in the author's note of this book, the author says, this novel owes its greatest debt to an 1800-plus-year-old novel that no longer exists, The Wonders Beyond Thule, by Antonius Diogenes. Only a few papyrus fragments of that text remain, but a 9th century plot summary written by the Byzantine patriarch Photios suggests that The Wonders was a big globe-trotting tale, full of interlocking sub-narratives and divided into 24 books. It apparently borrowed from sources both scholarly and fanciful, mashed up existing genres, played around with fictionality, and may have included the first literary voyage to outer space. So yeah, that's kind of the Cloud Cuckoo Land, the ancient Cloud Cuckoo Land, appears in excerpts at the beginning of the chapters sometimes. And so through the course of this Cloud Cuckoo Land, we actually also read the ancient story of Cloud Cuckoo Land and the character there that goes through all sorts of adventures and all sorts of places, also changing forms into different animals and things. And so the ancient Cloud Cuckoo Land is really cool too. So just some main thoughts and themes that I took away from this book. Number 1 is the theme of outsiders. So I mentioned all 5 of these characters are outsiders for different reasons, and they find themselves disconnected or alone at various times in their lives, and they either reach out for books in that sort of loneliness, or in some cases the books actually reach out to them. And I can't really go into that too much without giving too much away, but that also helps them with connection and bonding. Mrs. Flowers, the virtual librarian on the intergenerational ship, says to Constance at one point, Mrs. Flowers gestures at the measureless shelves. Each of these books, child, is a door, a gateway to another place and time. You have your whole life in front of you, and for all of it, you'll have this. It will be enough, don't you think? Constance has this huge, virtual library. Is it enough, though? That's something that we explore with her character specifically. And then another sort of thought and theme is the books themselves and their power and also their fragility. I think it's the fragility principally that's a main theme of this book. Anna eventually meets some Italians who are in Constantinople looking for books to send back to their Renaissance prince, the Duke of Urbino, and one of them asks Anna at one point if she knows the story of Noah and how he created an ark filled with everything that would be needed to start the world over. And then he compares that ark to Constantinople. He says, for 1,000 years, your city, this crumbling capital, he waves a hand toward a window, was like that ark. Only instead of 2 of every living creature, do you know what the good Lord stacked inside this ship? Books, the scribe smiles, and in our tale of Noah and the ship of books, can you guess what is the flood? Anna doesn't know, and so he goes on to say, the flood is time. Day after day, year after year, time wipes the old books from the world. The manuscript that you brought us before, that was written by Elian, a learned man who lived at the time of the Caesars. For it to reach us in this room, in this hour, the lines within it had to survive a dozen centuries. One bad-tempered abbot, one clumsy friar, one invading barbarian, an overturned candle, a hungry worm, all those centuries are undone. I just love that quote because this really, to me, illustrates how books can become lost. You know, we think of it today where there's millions in some cases of books, and so they may never be completely lost. But nevertheless, once a book goes out of print, if it's out of print and no copies are no longer being made of it, the copies slowly disappear year after year. And after about 500 years, how many copies would be left? You know, in some cases, it would be lost. You know, the work would be lost then. And also, it's interesting to me to think about like how we determine by whatever book you decide to pick up and read, you're actually keeping that book sort of alive in a way because you're contributing to either it staying in print or staying in circulation. And so that, you know, we really impact that, I think, by our reading. And I think that's really cool as well. So some final thoughts about the book. You know, when it's all said and done, there is a connection through time with Cloud Cuckoo Land and these characters, and I just loved it. It was just a great, fun reading experience. And now I can't really wait to get to All the Light We Cannot See. I think I would really enjoy that now that I've experienced this novel by Anthony Doerr. So more Anthony Doerr will be coming up for me on this channel in the future, so stay tuned for that. My next chat, however, will be Code Girls by Liza Mundy. I don't know if you can see that. The untold story of the American women code breakers of World War II. I have finished this already, so I will have a chat on it coming up soon. Until next time, take care.